are live. Let's go ahead and give some time to folks to jump on in here. But if you can see us and you can hear us, go ahead and give us a thumbs up. Let us know you can see and hear us so we can go ahead and give you a shout out, say thank you for your service, and recognize you and appreciate you for joining us. So we have a great show today lined up. As you may have seen from the info card that we put out there today, we're going to be talking TBI, traumatic brain injury. So DP here at Sean. I'll let Sean say hello as folks start coming on in. So hey Sean, how you doing? Long time no see.
Hey, how you doing, DP? I'm Sean Gavitt on the VACI Champions team. I'm a veteran coach and really blessed to be able to serve with DP and the rest of the team. And I'm looking forward to going into this very complex but sensitive subject today.
Awesome. Yes, we got some folks like we usually like to do. We'll go ahead and give them a quick ring here and kind of say hello and recognize them, appreciate them for joining us here. So let's see, who do we have in the comment section saying hey? So Greg says hello. Hey Greg, thanks for joining us and jumping on here with us. We'll put the comments up here. So Greg's in the house. Our page is in the house here. For those of you that may have not seen, we actually rebranded. So we actually have our Brian Reese page now is the VA Claims Insider page. That's pretty cool. So you'll see a lot of more of the entire team popping on in. What's going on, Jason? Jason's in the house. Michael, what's going on, brother? Hey, Lisa. What's up, Hiram? Greg, thanks for your service. U.S. Air Force, 87 to 92. Aim high. Casey, thanks for joining us, brother. USS Ike, CVN 69, 89 to 92. Thanks for joining us, brother. Appreciate you. Hey, Tim. Nikki, how are you? Awesome, Greg. Appreciate it. Thanks for the mic check and sound check on our side. John, Navy retired, Japan. Thanks for your service, brother. Appreciate you. Fort Bliss on James side of the house. Got you. Appreciate you. Pine Belt, Louisiana. Hey, Derek, how are you? Thanks, here. Appreciate you, brother. Chattanooga, Tennessee. How far is that? Tennessee, huh?
Oh, that's an hour and a half from me. I'm up in Prim Springs, Alan, just south of Franklin. Good to see you.
Yeah. So this is a loaded one here. Let's see if folks try 15 just get my. Thanks, James. Thank you for that testimony. We're definitely going to be talking a lot about trying to save folks time on some of these things. That's going to be a big part of some of the things we'll talk about here. Robert, thank you for joining us. Thank you for your service. Hey, Daryl, how are you? Awesome. Champaign, Illinois, appreciate you. Hey, Troy. Darren, thank you for your service, 2005, 2009. Appreciate you. What's up, Combat Craig? In the house, coming in from YouTube. So we have folks from YouTube. We have folks on Facebook as well. Rashida, how are you? And let's see, Army 73 to 75. Appreciate you, Fred. Thank you for your service, brother, for sure. George, 68 to 71. USMC, Semper Fidelis. Thank you for being here, brother. Appreciate you. 01 to 05, Todd, Navy. Appreciate you. Let's see. Inside. Hey, we'll move into that. Today's going to be real big on TBI. Awesome, Jason. 99 to 2019. Ohio's in the house. Awesome. And as you guys kind of keep coming on in, please feel free to continue to post, your branch of service, times you served and things like that. We like to be able to recognize that and share some of that. So thank you very much for joining us and being with us here. So one of the things that we'll start moving in to our topic for the day is going to be TBI. So as you saw, we're going to be covering 3 mistakes to avoid and how to successfully service connect TBI as it relates to, for some individuals that may be first-time filers, those that are going to look at an increase potentially, and those that are looking at to disconnect them, right? So to kind of set the stage here, we have individuals that are service connected for TBI, and they may be at 0, but they should be higher, right? So we'll talk a little bit about that bucket. We have the individuals that may have never filed for TBI and are unaware that they can actually file for it and may be qualified for it. So how to go about doing that successfully. And then we'll have a conversation as well for those that may have TBI secondary to something else or connected with something else, and the issues that presents for some individuals. But before we begin, quick disclaimer. We are not medical professionals. We are not a claims representative. We're not VSOs. VA Claims Insider is a education-based company. What we're doing is having a conversation as veterans who have walked this journey, right? Who have experienced some of these issues. I'll let Sean kind of talk about his journey and how long it's taken him going through the TBI road, but this is experience and our personal accounts along with the experience we've seen helping other veterans in their journey. But this is information and education. Still, you have we recommend that you have legal representation if you need it, and you reach out to medical professionals to verify things, right? This is two veterans sharing their journey and trying to pay it forward to hopefully give you something to be able to ask a question about going forward with those professionals there. So regarding TBI, let's just kind of start at the beginning. So Sean, why are we talking TBI today, and why should I even spend the next, 30, 45 minutes even listening to what you got to say about TBI? Because, it's a TBI thing, right? You hurt your head, it's a thing. I might get rated, maybe not. What's your take on this? Give me the 101 of Sean Gavitt on TBI.
Sure. For years, I think that many soldiers, sailors, Marines, Coast Guard have suffered TBI, but through the years, through imaging and things of that nature, the history of TBI has become more understood. And, one of the things that they're saying these days is in the war on terror, TBI is like the key injury that is really being taken away from those wars, primarily due to IED blasts, accidents to the head, things of that nature. Not to mention that, honestly, personal protection actually became much better through the years. So when you wouldn't have survived a blast before, you are surviving it you have a much better survivability rate these days. So, the TBI is not an easy thing to claim. It's a very difficult thing. I've been working on my TBI claim for 26 years, and it's not a joke. There's been several lawsuits that were precedent law. There was one in specific that was in '08 that kind of changed how everything was rated. So understanding those changes is very important, because I think the VA, they're excellent with dealing with TBI vets, but they really have a very difficult time rating it, because there's so many things that can happen. I mean, it's your brain. Let's be real. It's your brain. That is the core of everything: thought, process, movement, feeling. It's the absolute center of our intelligence. So when you damage that, it can present very long-term effects.
So I think kind of keying in there. So personally, on your side of the house, how long have you been at this yourself? Right, you kind of mentioned a little bit that you have been at this for a few days and kind of have dealt with it. Tell me a little bit about that. Right, what does that mean? Right, how long have you been going at this?
So when I got out of the service, after I had my event, effectively I went to the re-enlistment NCO just a couple months after I was out of the hospital I was in the hospital for 3 months. They did not offer me re-enlistment in the infantry, and that's why I departed service. And the primary reason was due to memory and concentration issues. They didn't feel like I was combat ready. So that was the big hint when I got out. I've said this in other videos. It was kind of go to the VA and get treated, and at that point, I did, but I didn't know what I was getting treated for. There was mental health issues. There was TBI that existed. There was multiple physical issues, and through that 26 years, I've had to do a lot of self-exploration in order to understand my own conditions. Eventually, those who have experienced a TBI understand exactly what I'm talking about. When you have an event with TBI, there's like a split in your life. There's this split, and you may be able to remember your childhood. If you can't, that can be a reason. I can remember my childhood. I don't remember my event, but there are certain times that, like, big family things happen that my family talks about that I have no idea what they're referencing. The actual event I don't remember, and I don't remember 2 to 3 months after. It's very hard for me to figure out because the medical records Actually, I didn't really get treated for TBI. They were treating me for my head injuries instead of the TBI itself. This was a little earlier than they came up with all this technology. But I was hospital bound for quite some time. And quite frankly, I've been through it, man. I've been through every form of treatment that you can possibly think of. I've been through the claims process. I immediately got attached to TBI the minute that I considered putting in for it. I didn't really understand what a TBI was or concussion was. And in '04, I said, listen, I'm going to go for this. And lo and behold, I was attached. I was attached at 40%, which back then was a pretty high rating for TBI. Through my misunderstanding of things, about 4 years later, right after the law precedent, I went back in and it screwed my claim completely up, and I've been fighting it ever since. And it's something that as you get older, a lot of TBI vets will get better. I want to give hope, number one, but there is about a 20% component from the statistics that I've read that it will be debilitating. Every TBI vet will be at a bigger risk of dementia and Parkinson's disease. And that's why it's such a passion for me, because we're not planning for now with a TBI claim, we're planning for the future. When you're unable to take care of these things, that's going to present a problem, especially if you are suffering dementia or Parkinson's disease, which is very serious. I think a lot of us know people who have dementia. You ain't operating in a VA environment at that point. You're not able to fight your claim. So what are you going to do it for? Are you going to do it for your family when you can't remember anything, or you get aggravated and angry all the time, or you wake up and you don't even know where you are? This when you go through this level of TBI that I've been chasing, and then you're dealing with a dehabilitation throughout the years, and it's all recorded, you start to understand more and more about the TBI, but understand less and less about yourself. It's very hard to put into words because you can't put a name to it, especially if you suffer mental health issues as well. So those two can intermix. But TBI is just one of those funky things. I'll let you go ahead and
No, and I think that's a good point to kind of bring up, right? So for reference points for our folks, right? We mention this website, right? We always kind of bring it up when we talk. If you have not visited Military Disability Made Easy, it's one of our websites that we have a lot of useful information. One of the key things I just kind of want to touch on here is when you come to this site, as you will see, this is going to give you a lot of good information, right, as to what it is, how it's rated. Today it's going to be very weight top. We're actually going to put together a series that Sean is going to be leading, deep diving TBI initial, right? Individuals who've never filed a TBI claim, TBI increases, and how to be able to separate those for those that may, for example, have PTSD and TBI connected, or migraines and TBI connected, but you're not properly rated. But if you head on over to Military Disability Made Easy, you do a search for TBI in the search on the top right, you'll see this page here. And the good thing is you'll have information on what it is, but it'll also then begin to give you how it's rated, and then also break down the variety of different symptoms and how they're classified on the rating scale, right? So I don't want to go too much into detail, but Sean, looking at this right here, right? You've been at this for 20 odd years. You know, you successfully have been able to get ready for TBI. You're in the process of looking at how that can be separated and helping share some of that story. But what is this specifically here, right? Like, I'm looking at this category, I'm seeing executive functions, I'm seeing judgment, orientation, I'm seeing motor activity, visual, communication, consciousness. Like, you know, disclaimer, it's the brain. So what is happening here, Sean, right? Like, what is this?
Yeah, so this is basically the 10 facets of TBI is what they call it, and those are direct result of a TBI injury. I do encourage everybody to go and read this. Inherently, what's weird about TBI is it is the most complex rating to get attached to from a perspective of all the criteria in the Congress passed laws, right? So to be a TBI vet and attempt to go about this, man, it's hard. So the bottom line is the one exception to this is consciousness. You're either conscious or you're not. So, you know, that's for the guys that we know that are just comatose, and guys and gals. You know, it's an unfortunate part of TBI, but there are just times that you're going to get irreparable brain damage. But each one of these things actually, since it's your central nervous system and your central thought system, these cognitive functions and the judgment and the social interaction are the details of what can be damaged as a core piece of that. Now, what I'm going to implore all of you to do is go out and watch some of our PTSD videos. And all of a sudden, you're going to start reading about executive function, judgment, orientation. It's kind of funny because guess what is also on the TBI residuals component, the facets, rating table, all the same things that's on the mental health. There's very few that don't interact. But basically the way that those rate, okay, and I want to be careful that we section those out, is dependent on the number of severity is the percentage that you actually get. So you'll go from 0 all the way to 100. Now, it's only going to go with the worst facet. So when you're looking at these 10 facets and you have these numbers 0, 1, 2, 3 in total, depending on what checkbox you get, if you get 1, 2 in executive function and then a 3 in judgment, you're not going to be rated on the executive function. You're only going to be rated on the judgment component, although it will still be generally TBI, but you'll be at a 70% rating just for the facet, okay? So there's kind of this foundational TBI component, and that's what we're looking at here. Now, there's certain ones that just don't go to total, all right? So what if you only have one of those facets that only rates like 0, 1, 2, and 3, like social interaction? They don't think that there is a total, so the highest you're going to get there is a 70%, right?
So slow that down. So what you're saying is, depending on obviously the level of impairment that a veteran may have for a service-connected TBI condition, the rating scale that we're looking at is going to be a 10, 40, 70, 100 based off these sections we have here, correct?
A 10, I'm sorry?
The as far as the rating scale
yes,
right here.
Yes, the percentages. You just saw it, right? So he said words that I should have recognized. He was pointing it. And honestly, I got lost when he threw the numbers out. Those are some of the things that you might experience as part of the executive function component. But that's correct. If you have a 0 in executive function, that's a 0%, considering that if you got a nexus statement based on that. A 1 is a 10, a 2 is a 40, a 3 is a 70, and a total is 100. So if you look at social interaction, there is no such thing as a total, okay? If you look at so the highest you're ever going to get in social interaction is a 3. However, if you rate a total in executive function, that's 100. You're just going to get 100% for the TBI facets. Does that make a little more sense, DP? I hope I'm explaining that.
No, it does, because so you know, it's kind of rhetorical, but what we're trying to do really is flesh out this whole concept of what's happening, right? It's that for certain individuals, the big takeaway, right? Spoiler alert, the brain, right? Like the song goes, this is connected to that. The brain affects everything, right? So all the factors that Sean Gavitt is affected by his brain in some shape, fashion, or form. So how that affects you, that's what we're looking at, right? So this is a complex situation, because when you look at this, it's not just saying, oh, I've had this or I have that. It's literally, what are those things that are happening, right? So for example, Sean just shared right now, you know, I said a thing and I threw it off, right? I'm not going to, you know, speak to Sean's symptoms and whatnot, but the fact of the matter is, like he shared, he does have TBI, right? So because we work together, I understand and we know that these are things that sometimes I may have to repeat a thing or do a thing, and it's only because of the fact that, sadly, for many veterans, they don't have that ability, right? So to just kind of put it very, you know, give an example, Sean shared he's been at this process. He suffered a TBI. Now we're working together with veterans, and there are instances where the TBI that he's experienced and the symptoms he suffers with affect certain things, right? the blessing we have here in our community is we understand that, right? Like if our disabilities take the best of us sometimes or the worst of us, we're able to tap out and take a day off. But sometimes for many of you, you don't know what's happening, right? So it's not that Sean is just forgetful or today he just kind of got frazzled or whatever, because we'll try to, add things to it. But like we saw on that rating criteria there and those symptoms, if there are parts of your, body that are affected here, that's kind of what's going on, right? Many individuals don't know that this right here is the reason why some things may be at play, but you're not linking it, right? You may be able to explain some of these symptoms, but what's happening from a motor activity side of the house, and we'll kind of come back to this here in a second, what is happening in that regard. So I just kind of want to pause real quick and, just looking at that, right? Then my question to you, Sean, as someone who in our team, for example, is, what I call our resident TBI expert when it comes to this. Out of the 833 conditions that you can claim at the VA, what would you say? Where would you put TBI in the, I guess, scale of that? Would it be something that most people can do? Would it be a difficult claim to claim? In the 833 possible things out there, what's your thesis on where TBI falls?
So it depends on your specific scenario. Certain people were hit by IEDs that got something called a I can't say it, GCS, which is coma scale. I forget the first word. I'm having trouble. But the GCS is basically the foundation of if you've suffered a TBI or not. TBI comes in three flavors: mild, moderate, and severe. And that's not just the VA. That's in medicine, all in all. And it's also going to depend whether you had a brain scan at the time. It's if you can prove your event with the relative ease, or if you could get body statements that talk about an IED attack, or those who had a motor vehicle accident, you probably had more access to those brain scans than anybody else. But brain scans aren't always going to show everything. They've actually found through research that, at the molecular level, your brain can have issues, which does affect executive function and memory. So it's by far the number one hardest from a strategic perspective. Number one by farthest to understand how it works, and number one in a value. Because honestly, if you get a TBI, even if it's at 0%, it opens up a plethora of secondary conditions, which we haven't even delved into, because it's really two ways to rate TBI. There's those 10 facets we were talking about, and then the residuals of those, which would be physical conditions such as headaches, tinnitus, Parkinson's disease, dementia, motor activity issues, ataxia, diplopia. For those who don't know what those things are, diplopia is double vision. So if you I have a Fresnel lens in this right here to try to merge my vision again. I've had the problem ever since. I get one eye that goes all wonky. And so those are residuals of TBI. Diplopia, you're either number one born with, or number two got it from a head trauma. Now, from what I understand, and again, we're not doctors here, those are the two ways that you can get diplopia. I was not born with it. I've had I've had a lot of blast injury or blast exposure. And then number two, I had a major event to where I received open head wounds. So in that case, it's a little easier to prove a TBI as long as you have a diagnosis. Again, let's not forget the core component. You need the diagnosis of TBI, and you need the diagnosis of the additional parts.
And I pulled up here just for those that see, again, when you go into Military Disability Made Easy, you will see the section that covers residuals and kind of how they look at things. So that was right above when we began the buckets and categories. But I really would implore you, anyone out there who may be suffering with a TBI or maybe have a family member or veteran they know who's looking to look into this, right? Sit down and pay attention, because really it's a complex thing, right? Here, for example, we have a list of impairments based off the top, right? So for these different sections, what are the numbers that correspond? And in turn, how does that equate? Here we have some symptoms and things that many right now, if you just look at this page here, again, it does make the point that these are subjective depending on the situation, right? So You may have instances where some have vision, hearing issues, loss of smell and taste, damage to the brain, so numbness, tingling, difficulty doing certain things. For some, it's paralysis that they deal with, tremors, migraine headaches, pain, urinary incontinence, bowel issues, right? And again, I'm mentioning these because if you look at this, many individuals may be rated for this stuff. And that's kind of what Sean began to go into, where that's where now, if you see how complex this is, for many, you're just happy, right? I got a rating, I'm good to go. But the reality is that you have it kind of backwards for some, right? So, we'll jump to that in a second. But Sean, so again, recapping to the point, on your side of the house, 27 years going at this, check. TBI, a complex situation. One thing before I forget, I want to make sure that we shared, you gave us a good resource I think is definitely worth bringing up here, is the Mayo Clinic, right? You can literally do a search, Google search, traumatic brain injury, Mayo Clinic, and really do the research, right? Just to know exactly what's going on there. So it's not just military disability made easy. It's not DP and Sean saying a thing. This is, science here, medical, and we want you to be informed and know what is available to you. So again, a good resource I would definitely say to check out Mayo Clinic, TBI, and some of the same things we talked about here. They break it out as a whole in the field of medicine. But specifically to you, Sean, so I understand obviously it's a complex issue. This is not something many individuals are going to be able to just effectively do on their own. Many times they get underrated and they think, what's the worth of even trying? We just discussed that for some, the rating potential, depending on where they're at to be properly rated, it can be more than zero. It can, it can range depending on what they have. Check. Your journey, though, got you into an interesting situation because of the PTSD and your TBI.
Yeah.
Neuropsychology and psychology. Why is that something that might be worth mentioning in this capacity?
Yeah, and I think you've been trying to bring me there, and I finally realized it. But so listen, when you have TBI and PTSD, there are a lot of symptoms that overlap, okay? And those symptoms are things like anger issues, forgetfulness, loss of understanding where you are, loss of orientation, things of that nature. So there are different specialists that you really need to find in order to deal with a TBI. One is a psychologist. The psychologist is really going to be able to tell if you've got after effects from a mental health perspective. That's it. And I'm not limiting that. I think that's a very important factor of it, but they're going to help you through those short-term stressor moments, like the pendulum clicking, and you have those stressor events that get you out of control on a mental health perspective. Then you've got the neurologist who deals with the brain and the nerves and everything like that, to where they're going to be able to do electro nerve studies, things of that nature. And then there's somebody called a neuropsychologist that deals with both. And let me tell you, that's kind of the key factor when it comes to TBI and understanding what components come from where. Understanding the difference of the mental components that can affect you from a PTSD perspective or TBI. And let me tell you, as a TBI vet, I know when it's a TBI issue versus a PTSD issue. Not because I'm actively doing it, but when you reflect on those moments. Let me give you an example. When I was in sales and I had a client, and I had been working with that client for 3 months, okay? And everything seems to go with threes for me, but honestly, 3 months I was working with this client. It went quiet for about 2 or 3 weeks, and then all of a sudden I received information from my coworker that said, hey, we've got to assemble this, let's get moving. I had no idea what they were talking about. No idea. And so I'm like, man, what are you talking about? And so he's sending me emails from me, and this is very complex information that I typed out. I still to this day have no memory of those discussions. I have no memory of that client. I have no memory of the people outside of the ones that I work day to day repetitively with. I had no memory of it, because with a TBI, your brain has difficulty actually forming new memories, and it will be selective from that perspective. A neuropsychologist is the one who can actually sit down and explain that to you. Okay. Not to say that psychologists can't, they have those understandings as well, but you need to understand the interaction from the psychology, the writing of memories, and things of that nature. So when you're trying to get this type of information, it's very, very key that you understand what type of specialist to try to go see. I do want to say this real quick. The VA has created a new clinic. I don't know how new is. It's past few years, right? Called the Polytrauma Clinic. And if you're fortunate enough and you're diagnosed with TBI, you have pretty much easy access to the Polytrauma Clinic. And let me tell you, that helped me more than anything. What they did is they actually put me into occupational therapy. They put me into physical therapy. They put me into all kinds of brain scan capabilities. So I've had every brain scan possible. I've had occupational therapy, physical therapy, and recreational therapy, because I do have motor skills problems, right? So they're trying to correct that. It's unfortunately not helping, but there's only so much they can do. Recreational therapy was really kind of the thing that helped my mental health more than anything, because they taught me how I can do things again that I enjoy. And you could see, this is not a fake smile, man. I'm telling you, my life has become so much better because of the VA's capability to do that. What I do also want to mention is on July 18th at 1 p.m., I'm going to be getting into this real deep. I'm gonna get a little more technical from these perspectives, because I literally, over the 26 years, had to repeat, recycle, repeat, recycle in order to try to understand how the VA actually rated TBI. And still to this day, and I did it beforehand, and DP, you were on with me, we had to go through a review of these so that I could re-understand it, right? And so I'll get into more technical detail, and the good news is it will be on video. So I don't know if you want to mention.
Yeah, so this today really is a primer for a series on TBI, right? We're kind of covering a little bit of everything, but the first session will be like the initial, then for the increases, those instances where things have to be broken up. So it's really a very complex topic, as you've seen in the previous thing we brought up, right? It's not like just migraines where if you get so many and this is an intensity, this is what it rates, right? It's a more complex thing there. And the real takeaway is that 26 years at this, in 2 days or so, I want to say Sean is going to actually hit his 27th anniversary of going through this to the day. So 2 days from now would make 27 years that Sean has been going through this with the VA. So this is not something he read in a book yesterday or something he Googled last night. This is literally his life's journey. However, and I'm going to say it again, if you take away nothing else, it's what Sean said in the beginning here. We're trying to help you plan for tomorrow today. We're trying to save you 27 years of not knowing how to do a thing. Because here's the reality. That smile on Sean's face was not there 25, 20, 30, 10, 15, 5 years ago, right? And the fact that today he's able to do that, that's great. And we want to celebrate that thing. But how many veterans out there don't even know what's happening, right? You cannot work through a thing you don't know, right? We like to sometimes make parallels to things. And it's, if you literally had an impacted tooth and you needed a root canal, guess what? You're not going to be a happy camper until you get that root canal, right? You can walk around all you want not getting it done, but you're going to have a problem, right? If you have a broken bone in your leg and you're walking around on it, you're just going to be in pain and not be able to enjoy life. When it comes to these invisible injuries, these are the things that tend to happen, right? You don't see that, right? You can see Sean think everything is fine, and you don't realize what is happening, right? You want to be able to do the things you want to do, but when you have your brain that has been injured, traumatic brain injury, TBI, there are things that you may lose and not reconnect, right? Some have the ability to reconnect some synapses and get some things and relearn how to do a thing. But Sean, for example, can give 2 highlights of 2 things he had to learn. Again, as a grown man, right, in his life, locomotor skills. What's 2 things, Sean, you would say that had you not known that TBI is something that you had to deal right and begin the process of getting help, etc. But now, fast forward, what are 2 things that you had to relearn how to do that most folks wouldn't even attribute or think like that's because of that, not just because of life or old age or things we might attribute it to?
Seeing properly. Seeing, and I'm assuming you're talking about my physical journey. So seeing properly has been the biggest challenge. So I'm not really supposed to be driving because of my double vision. It is not a new thing. It's something that I finally went to go get checked out for, but I've seen double for the majority of my life, and it's a whole new area to try to relearn to see single again. As odd as that sounds, trying to see one again, my brain is really messing with me now that I've got these Fresnel lenses. But it started to get so bad, and it started to decrease that I mean, the double really got wide, right? So you got double vision to where you have your hand out and like the edges right here. Now I'm seeing two hands when I've got one up, right? So I finally had to get it corrected. And relearning that is key. The other thing that I was able to learn was tactics, not to maintain memory. You're just not going to remember certain things if you have that damage. But occupational therapy had to reteach me the capability to organize and reschedule and understand how to put things into their place, so that I knew where to reference it. Because it's not just a matter of forgetting where you put your keys. You're talking day-to-day life to where you forget things. I call them my goldfish moments, right? So a goldfish theoretically only has a memory of 5 minutes. That's like the majority of my life. So how do I go back and how do I go to my clients that I work with now and remember their specifics? It's very difficult. So, I will tell you that in our internal system, I've got notes crazy. The problem with doing that is when I have a quick chat with one of my clients, I got to read the notes. Or I just got to tell them, guys, I don't remember. Retell me, right? So that's been a real challenge to relearn.
How about locomotive? Give me one quick one on locomotive motor function.
Oh, motor function? So we're still working on that. I'll be honest. Balance issues have been a major problem.
Right, and honestly, I want to just stop right there, right? Because really, the goal here, right, is this for many, they would attribute it to the wrong thing. What I'm segueing here is the TBI being intermixed with other things, right?
Yes.
Sean Gavitt has PTSD. What Sean Gavitt has explained, many of you would say is due to PTSD. There are parts of that are part of the psychological trauma of the things that happened. However, because of the traumatic brain injury, there are other things at play here. And if you don't understand that how all these things are playing, that's where it gets so complex, because many individuals may have TBI at 0 with PTSD at 30, and they're like, well, it got combined, I'm happy, it got rated. Like, wait a second, there's other things happening, right? So the locomotive, there's things that Sean is still working on, but the other part of this is now how the TBI now in turn exacerbates the mental health. Because, spoiler alert, are you a single person, Sean, who lives by yourself in a cabin? No one depends on you, right? You're just by yourself in a cabin. You have a family. You have children. So my point being, how does that affect that? So the goldfish moments and the balance issues and the remembering things, you know what? Let's move away the clients. How does that affect you when you forget your son's activities? The wife says we're going to do a thing and you don't remember that. You know what I mean? And we open these things as not to say, hey, look at us. It's saying, look, this is the reality that if you don't understand truly what this is, he gave you the spoiler alert. You, as a veteran who's suffering and has dealt with TBI, you at times can't remember even what's going on. So that's the conundrum here. That's the punchline. Because we're trying to have a conversation to point to things where you may not remember some of these things. So you can't complain about what you don't know, right? You have individuals that are dealing with things and they don't realize, like, well, I deal with this, I deal with that, yes, but you're not collecting the dots, right? So being able to have frank conversations like this, and at times, sadly, being able to pull resources, right? Again, me and Sean did not, but hypothetically speaking, if me and Sean came through boot camp together, went to high school together, you know what? Sometimes as a man or as a woman, you got to put your ego aside and say, you know what, Sean, let me ask you a question, man. I don't remember anything of when you and I were in high school together. Tell me a story real quick about some stuff, because I just can't get it. It's like, DP, back in the day, man, you used to do this, that, the 30. You don't do that anymore. He's like, I did? Like, like, because you can't articulate at times what you have lost if you don't remember it. That's the issue with the brain, because folks just don't know. And being able to come to a place to say, you know what, I think I might have to have a conversation with people that can reference those points. And they're not easy conversations to have, right? It's not easy to have to talk to a sibling, talk to your wife, or talk to someone who knows you and say, hey, Sean, I don't remember this, man. Can you, what happened? You know what I mean? And it's like, brother, we were there and what happened was this. And it's just like, what? All I remember, I woke up, I was medevac somewhere, and that's all she wrote. Like, dude, you freaking flew, or this, or, those details have to be at times spoken about, because you know what? I recovered, I'm fine, I'm putting it away, I don't want to talk about it anymore. When we're looking at the disability aspect, unless you get to the root cause of what's happening, you're not going to get a fair shake. So this isn't what you must say. You have to know what happened. You have to know how it's affecting you. And when you come to that point, then the strategy comes into place. Can you quickly touch on, and again, we're going to use PTSD as an example, but because of how similar those things are, why is it at times that that's an issue when you start intermixing PTSD, for example, and TBI or other things, right? Folks just think it's a gimme. It's just going to be mixed together. We kind of answered it, but what's your take on that based off what you worked and seen?
Oh, it's almost like the anger comes, and I've always explained it as my brain kind of feels always diagonal and split in two ways. So when you have those TBI events, I'm going to give you an example. This morning I was supposed to wake the kids up. I wake up earliest, so I wake up at 5:30, 5 o'clock, 5:30 every day. I was supposed to wake the kids up for summer school. Yes, summer school, right? So at that point, I completely mixed up the hour. So I thought it was at 7:30, and I thought the school started at like 7. You see what I mean? And so I went to wake everybody up at 6. My wife yelled at me because I woke them up too early, but then I didn't wake them up and I was off time. It's hard to even explain. But that created an argument between the entire family. And the first thing that goes on is this all goes back to the stressor. It immediately goes back to the stressor. I had to walk away, and I think my wife understood, because I was so flustered with my inability to address times properly, which was due to the TBI, that kicked in my PTSD stressors, and I just went and walked away. Okay? I'm usually not good at that. I'm usually like, let's go for the fight. But that happened this morning. This is a daily event that happens all the time. A TBI vet gets very aggravated, very moody. Families feel like they're walking on eggshells. Sounds a whole lot like PTSD. So take that TBI instrument of having that moodiness, that anger, that disconnect, and then have them remember the incident that they can't remember, but know it happened and can't control it. But so many things are out of their control that you get exasperated because you want to be able to get your life back. You want to control things and you can't control them, but your family puts something out of the way, and that messes your whole day up, which is going to mess everybody else's up. Does it make sense?
Yeah.
So I want everybody to recognize, if you know a TBI vet, give them some grace, because they're going to slip all the time. If you're a TBI vet, have that conversation. I never use mine as an excuse. I actually try to use it as a strength. And that's really weird. But if I post on my Facebook page the things that I was able to accomplish. And, it's very important for me to log my successes. I own a small farm. Dealing with that as a TBI vet, especially one who can't use his right arm due to motor skills, balance issues. I've run into my barn with my tractor. It's hilarious. But that wasn't because I wasn't paying attention. It's because I saw 2 barns. And I ran into the wrong one. I tried to avoid the wrong one, and I've got a big old dent in my barn. But that was in process of me trying to move an outbuilding with my tractor. Okay?
And one thing I'll add to that, Sean, there is because what you mentioned, that can be Jimmy at 25, Mark
right.
at 45, Bill
Hmm.
at 75. TBI is no respecter of age. If you are dealing with this, right, because you know how it is, right? Come on, Sean, you're a little old, you didn't have your glasses. It's not that, right? We need to
No.
stop covering things, right? So the big takeaway here is for many individuals, you don't know, right? So it's not just PTSD, it's not just a migraine, it is a symptom of a thing. But let's not forget the origin of what's causing this. What was the genesis that has caused said thing? So if you're dealing with that TBI, arguably there are other things that you may well be affecting you. And to Sean's point, you're planning for tomorrow because, knock on wood, the reality is, what happens when some of Sean's symptoms get worse?
Hmm.
Just because today his locomotive skills and functions might be impaired to a degree, it doesn't mean that it may not get worse. We're saying you can improve, but it also can go the other way. And it's a whole lot, it's a thing that we've all seen. We got that uncle, that grandfather, that old Vietnam vet, that old Korean War veteran that had all these issues. And guess what? There was just no way to classify that some of the things that may have got denied for was actually a TBI. You got thrown off the ship, you hit a thing, and you were sent to a thing, you got put back up, and off you went. But after that, never, things were not the same, right? It was not part of the lexicon to say PTSD or TBI and things like that. And today we understand that, no different than football players, right? Now we understand that they are traumatic brain injuries for those athletes, right? Things that we have seen in professional fields. The brain is a brain is a brain is a brain. Whether you're a boxer, a football player, a soldier, or someone who got hit by a vehicle, walking out the supermarket, there's so many ways this can go. I want to get tactical real quick. Three
Hmm.
topics, three tips, and three things to avoid, and three things you can do to be successful. And then I want to move to questions here. The very first tip that when we talked about this, Sean, what would it be as far as looking at a let's see, we'll start off with negatives and then we'll go to positive, right? So give me
Yeah.
the first thing on the negative side, right? What is the one mistake anyone listening to us, wherever you might be, whether it's today or a month or a year from now, that should be avoided? What is the number one?
If you do not understand the source of things that can be caused by TBI, be very careful because you can lose your opportunity to get TBI easily disconnected from mental health. So if you suffer migraines, tinnitus, Parkinson's, diplopia, don't just file for those and go for them secondary to something else. You need to be strategic and reserve that for actually attaching it to TBI. Now, we're not coaching you independently. Speak to your coach, but I'm going to tell you straight up, if you're just saying, I want to get there quickly and I want to get headaches, be very careful with that,
So,
especially if you know you've had a TBI.
so you said a key word there, right? Come on, man, I got to get this thing. I've been waiting forever. I've been denied. Give me mistake number two.
Rushing a TBI claim, you cannot rush it. You have got to have your ducks in a row. You've got to go see the neurologist, the psychologist, and the neuropsychologist so that you can get every component of that. Focus on those individual conditions. So if you actually have tremors or muscle spasms that happen, you need to go to the doctor for that. When you go to the doctor, you mention your TBI. Okay?
Mm.
Every single condition should be thoughtfully cared for and treated appropriately. If you rush your TBI claim and start throwing things against a wall, give it up.
Look,
It's over.
Sean. Look, Sean. How old are you?
I'm 46.
Come on, man. I'm 23. Just got out the service. I can do this on my own, man. I get it. You had 27 years. I'm not 26, but I can figure this out, right? I get it. When you tried, Sean, you couldn't figure it out, right? The internet's here. I can Google the thing. I got this, right? I'm gonna go ahead and say what you do and do a thing. What's mistake number three?
Don't go it alone. I will tell you that I went it alone up to '04, got connected, and then I went it alone again and screwed it all up in '08. And I've been fighting it ever since. And my coach for this is David Pineda. I do not ever go along alone on my TBI. I talk to David Pineda, I talk to Brian, I talk to Maria, I talk to the entire VACI champions team and say, what are your thoughts of this? I have been continuously pursuing this claim. Here's the specifics. Calm yourself down. There's other things to get you to the rating that you need, but don't go it alone. Get a coach in your corner. Get the coach's team in your corner, because TBI is one of those things that I can say specifically that the champions work on the back end for TBI vets, because we understand that complexity. I've got several TBI vets that we're working with, and it is a constant. And then the other coaches will hit me up. Got a TBI vet. Here's the scenario.
And I have to stamp that real quick and reinforce that. That is the beauty of what happens here at VA Claims Insider, right? When we look at the fact that across the teams, right, on Team Champion, you have Sean, right? TBI rated veteran, understands this. We've talked about the journey. We have veterans that are, military sexual trauma survivors, both men and women. We have that in several other teams as well. Like, you'd be surprised the skill set that we're trying to bring forth. We share these stories and come out here and say this because we're not just saying, hey, do what I say. It's almost, hey, avoid doing what I did not do, right? This is a process that we've learned something. Something that Sean said really stuck out to me right now, and I want to just highlight it. And I'm not a sports fanatic. I don't know much of it, but I will say that I know enough to say that any professional sports athlete, regardless of the sport, trains and reinforces the basics. If you are the best of the best, Michael Jordan had a strength coach. He had a coach for this. If you watch NFL, there's a teams for this, a teams for that, a coach for this, a coach for that. When it comes to this process, we pay money to see professionals do a thing that are under the guidance of someone else to coach them. Sean just said, as a coach who has done this for 27 years and 2 days, understands TBI, still reaches out, and we had this conversation. Sean had a CMP not so long ago, and me and him just masterminded. Because the fact of the matter is, there's something we have that makes no sense sometimes. I can go at it alone. That's the reason you got nowhere. When we stop the ego and stop thinking we can do a thing, Sean knows this stuff, but it's perspective of saying, hey, DP, does this make sense? Did I go too deep on this? Because it's one of those things where even a surgeon does not perform surgery on himself. I'll say it again. A doctor does not operate on himself. Certain things you can't do for yourself because you will not be able to be objective to be able to say, Sean, you're good, shut it down. Because it's just human nature, right? So in this instance, for many of you, this is going to make the difference for the rest of your life. Your rating, the care, the services, everything that Sean has talked about, he has been able to get by virtue of being rated for it. You deserve this. Your grandfather, your uncle, your sister, your brother, that person out there doesn't know they need this help. They need this help. Right? So I have to just emphasize that don't go at it alone, because you can. But guess what? If it doesn't work out, we'll be here. But you can save yourself a lot of pain, heartache, and headache by having a strategy and plan to do it the right way. Right? Let's flip it to the positive, Sean. Give me something good, because that's too negative right there. Give me one tip.
Yeah. One tip would be, listen, if you've got both mental health and TBI, go for the mental health first. Period. End of story. Because then you lower the risk of actually having TBI intermixed with PTSD. Okay. And the reason being is when you go in for mental health, you've got a psychologist dealing with their component. The minute you go in to see a neuropsychologist or a neurologist to get the TBI attached, all of the existing symptoms are already established that would intertwine with TBI. And that little checkbox that says they are, I'm unable to tell the difference between what the TBI symptoms are and the PTSD goes away, because guess where that checkbox is not? It's not on the TBI exam. It is not. So all of a sudden, it's a lot easier for you to understand your PTSD or SSD symptoms against filing all of a sudden an increase or a new TBI claim to where recently that's been established. I'm going to avoid that, doc, and I'm going to go for where the real TBI issue exists.
You kind of you're jumping the gun here, man. So what's tip number 2? Because it seems to me like you're saying without saying it.
You got to have a strategy. You got to have that strategy.
And that is what working with a coach brings. It's being able to say, okay, how do I do a thing? Tom, I see your question. I'm going to bring it up here in a minute because we're going to go to Q&A. strategy, we'll move into that. Sean, you know what? It makes sense. I got it. What's tip number 3? Because that's what people need to understand here.
You got to understand what it is, and I'm going to go over it on the 18th of July, guys. Attend my class. It's very hard to get into very specifics on these Facebook Lives. I've got some very exciting stuff coming up. We're considering making it into a multi-part class.
Series, yep.
What's that?
A series, yep.
Yeah, a series class. And I would recommend that you go ahead and join my class on Saturday. What time is it? 12, I think.
Yeah, and we'll put on our landing page with a block attached to this. Will be there. Lisa's in the comment section, and she's put that there. We'll link also the page to our blog post that's going to accompany this as well, and that'll have that there for you. So July 18th at 1 p.m. We'll have that. So we'll send those to those individuals that want to join us, so we can get a little more intimate and talk about that there. So to recap. Tip number 1, you have to file for everything else, right? Know exactly which way you're going, which leads to tip number 2, filing with a strategy. We just explained how complex the situation is because of how it intertwines, right? Shameless plug. Tip number 3 is get with a coach that can help you navigate the process. Sean Gavitt is the guy I want to have a conversation with when it comes to this. So July 18th, if you're not there, you might be squared. But if you miss it, don't worry. We'll get it to you afterward as well. 3 things that we said to avoid, right? Don't mix TBI symptoms with other conditions, right? The flip side of this. Don't rush it. I get it. But don't rush it because you're going to end up, not putting yourself in an advantageous position there. Don't go at it alone, we said, but I will say on the don't rush it part, Sean personally has been successful in winning appeals. They have gone back, what's the longest one you've had, Sean? What was it, a year? You said you had one. A year back? What's the appeal you won?
Actually, all the way back to 1996. So at the beginning of this year, I think it was January, I won one that went back to 1996. So whatever that math, 24 years.
Well, look, that might be some folks might have not been, in diapers or listening to this stuff. So this is not something from a few days ago. If you have questions, please post them below. We'll do a quick 5-10 minute warning and start moving into some Q&A. Tom had a good question he brought up here. And I'll bring it up and I'll move it down here. So, what if I don't know? I don't have any of. I have hit my head running through the ship and board bell when I hit them, but I've never went to medical for it. What can I do when it comes to instances where this sounds great, Sean. I got it, but ain't no records anywhere of this stuff. For instances like that, which we see constantly with many cases, right? PTSD cases and so forth. What's one of Sean's tips on that regard there for someone like Tom?
Secure a message over myhealth.va.gov, your primary care physician. Tell them that you believe that you concussed yourself when you were in service and you would like to get checked out and you would like to see a neuropsychologist for testing. They have tests that will establish whether you've had a concussion. It's not going to establish whether it was service connected. It's going to establish whether you do in fact have issues with your executive functions, memory, judgment, things of that nature. They bring you, and it's about a 4 to 5 hour test. It's no joke. It's a very difficult test. Mm-hmm. I fell asleep during mine. So if I get a good night's sleep the night before, tip number 1A, get a very good night's sleep the night before, because it's exhausting. They test your functions. They weigh that up against your education level, your demographic, and it's a very interesting thing to go through. Understand this: the VA can only give that test once every 2 years to you because they find it that it does not apply if you do it any closer, because you can remember that stuff, right? You kind of prepare for that test. You don't want to prepare for that test. You want to just take it. Okay?
So take home here is, first thing is you must have a diagnosis. This applies to anything we're working with, right? So in instances like this, let's say you may have had a traumatic situation, you may have had an injury, you have to see someone. You have to go see your medical provider. If you go into our YouTube and you go back to a good fellow named Brian Reese who put all this together, every video he's ever put out that kind of started all this will always have the same punchline. If you're hearing our voices, if you're seeing us wherever you may be, and you haven't been to the doctor yet, get your behind to the doctor. You have to get in there, because that's the first step. ideally you want to have, right, what we call the collusive triangle instances, right? We have to have, you want to have a diagnosis, an in-service incident, and the nexus to connect those things, right? We call that the three things you want to have. But in instances where certain things are missing, we can then begin to put an argument to strengthen those, right? Things are called markers, right? We're not talking PTSD and MST today, but when we look at PTSD, for example, one of the things that happens for many individuals is they may not have a record of a thing that happened, but the marker are there in the veteran's file, right? Sean, for example, joins the military in 1990. Everything is going great. He says something happened in 95. From that point forward, everything began to go downhill. Now he went from a rising star to having all these issues. He went to the doctor about some random thing that had nothing to do with what actually happened, but he went somewhere, did a thing, got transferred from a unit, got demoted, kicked out the army, got a divorce, sent to jail, started drugs, all the point is something happened in this point that you can identify and say, look, this person's life was going like this, and here's something happened, and down it went. That marker can be used as a thing, right? In your case, Tom, right, things may have been happening, but from that point on, things began to go down. You went from a straight-A student, starting a business, doing a thing, and that kind of tailored down. What happened in this space that we can look at, right? So a diagnosis with some buddy statements, supporting documents, and medical opinions helps at least give you the most proof you can have to help do some of these things, right? So that's kind of how this works and kind of putting together a plan. But that's the same principles that would apply to anything you really want to claim when you have those key things there. In an ideal world, you have the sick call slip and the medical thing from what happened, you have a diagnosis, and off you go to the races. Not exactly how it happens, so we're almost trying to rework something in reverse and try to put all the pieces there that are missing and then make the argument for them to be able to say, well, based off all these things, it's like someone who has no cartilage in their knees and is completely jacked, right? And you can go to the doctor and you're like, look, Sean, either you were a marathoner or did something like that or crazy, or you've been jumping out of planes for a period of time, but the level of this deterioration, the level of this trauma, the level of the thing you have is not just a natural progression of a thing. Sean mentioned, I was not born with this thing. I have that now, right? So that begins to tell the tale of what's happening in your medical file, right? There are, the gender things that happen, genetic predispositions and so forth, but nobody is predisposed to have no cartilage in their knees and their back to be fused and all jacked up if they weren't doing certain things. Well, you were also infantry and you were also airborne and air assault and you had 500 jumps. Well, that might explain why. You may have not gone to sick call, but the proof is there to show a thing, right? And that's kind of how we look at instances like that. So I hope that one helps you, Tom, and others that may have asked. Hallie wants to say hello real quick. So, hey, Hallie, how are you? Thanks for tuning in. Rick, thank you for joining us also, my brother. Appreciate you and your service, my brother. If you guys have any questions, again, we'll kind of go down here the line. Jim, appreciate you, my brother. Let me scroll on down. Brian was in the comments as well. Tomorrow.
Actually, this is a good point, real quick. I just want to make sure that the Vietnam vets know, listen, TBI was not a thing back in the past. Put it together. If you were in Vietnam and you were hit by a significant blast, they're recognizing that more now. And I'm sorry to interrupt, VP. No. I want to make sure I call that out. There is a major degeneration with blast injuries that can occur. So if you're experiencing any of the things as stated on Military Disability Made Easy, get with DP and me. We're going to help you develop a plan.
In the comment section, this was shared there as well. For those who may have seen it, the associated things we're doing. So the deep dive is on the 18th. Tomorrow, I'm actually going to go live with Brian Reese, and we're going to be talking about service dogs and PTSD. Spoiler alert, for those that don't know, I had a service dog in training. As of yesterday, he is officially a service dog, and we have graduated, and Saturday is our graduation. So we passed our test yesterday. Saturday is graduation. So I'll be sharing my story as it relates to service dog, my service dog journey, and segueing into a series that we're going to have for service dogs in different ways to kind of get to that. So that's happening tomorrow with Brian Reese right here on the VA Claims Insider channel and the VACI Champion channel as well on our YouTube. And then we have also our series on TBI that Sean is going to start. Calendly /VACI Champions. On the comment, you put your information, put your email, say add me. We'll make sure you get that wherever you may see this. We'll make sure we pick you up there. We'll also have the blog post accompanying with the links that are needed there. Let me see here. A few folks just putting some service in here. A question that came in from Josh for you: is there a time limit to request a high-level review, Sean?
Yes, 1 year after your last decision. So you have up to 1 year from your decision date to file an HLR.
Thank you for your service, Sonia. Let's see. Okay, got that resource to you. We have some of our teammates in the comments, so they're sharing some information as well as you're commenting there on Facebook as well as on YouTube, so we'll be able to share that there. Let's see. All right, so we have some information there. Tom, I hope that helped there. For your question, let's see. Brian, thank you for jumping on in. He jumped in there and kind of said, hey, listen, I'm going to defer this one, right? Listen to these gentlemen. They are the experts. Sean is the expert. I'm the guy getting the coffee to help him do a thing.
I don't know. You coached me pretty well, DP.
Let's see. Jeff said, thank you for the tip on the secure messenger. To your point here, secure messenger is an awesome weapon in our arsenal to make sure things are entered into your records, right? You have a doctor visit that wasn't noted in there. Let's try it again. Here's the information that I tried to provide and send your way. So Carl says, thank you. I need to take the first step. I'm 40% TBI, 70% overall, medically retired, 30% after 14 years. Who do I need to talk to about, doing a claim? Sean Gavitt.
Go to vaciwins.com. That'll guarantee that I'll be assigned to your case.
Mm-hmm. So as we wrap up here, if you guys have any alibi questions, I always kind of put it out there. This is one of those topics because of the nature of what it is. It's a little more niche, right? It's not like something that's more common to some individuals. But what I will say is, wherever you're seeing this, again, it might be your father, your grandfather, your brother, your neighbor. If there's a veteran out there that may get value from this, share this with them, right? It's great then when we talk about certain things we all deal with, right? Bad feet, bad back, some of the common things, check, got it. But there are veterans out there suffering with these things that we talked about today that just don't know what they don't know, right? So I recognize that when we do sessions like this is one of those more sit down and think and really ponder it, right? Same thing when we talk about military sexual trauma, right? It's not one of those lives where, you're just kind of, saying a thing because you're really just kind of taking it in because it's one of those kind of aha moments for many individuals. So we hope that there's value that you may have received from us sharing, some of these tips. And Sean, gracefully sharing some of his background and his personal journey, because at the end of the day, the takeaway is if Sean can do it, you can do it, right? If I was able to do a thing, you can do a thing. We all put our pants on the same way. We don't have any special gifts that you do. We just have traveled the path less traveled, right? The road path less traveled, right? On this road here, and we want to make a point to help you, to navigate this and avoid that 27-year, race to try to figure out what could have been done quicker and sooner. So as we wrap up, Sean, what would you give as what I like to call our VC tips? Whenever we do our little things, we like to kind of have a tip to that person that may be out there, right? Maybe there's a veteran who has TBI, or someone says, Sean, you know what, look, I'm fine, things aren't that bad, get it, got the tips, got the things to avoid, but someone has it worse than me, right? Sean, why am I going to waste my time? I can see fine. I don't see double like you, right? My motor skills are pretty decent. I'll be fine. What's Sean Gavitt's tip for that veteran out there who might be hesitant to just say, hey, look, let's talk?
Yeah, so memory and concentration in itself, I think there's a lot of S with that. Just if you had any point that you might have hit your head, you need to speak to us, okay? We need to get you there. And my other tip would be join the Educate Yourself. And I'm going to try to help you educate yourself on the 18th. Make sure you join that class. It's going to be excellent. Be more technical on the deep dive side, but that's what TBI is. You got to really understand what you're going for. Log your incidents. If you are having memory issues, log it.
Awesome, Carl.
Log it. Yeah, that sounds great, Carl.
F. So we covered that in the beginning. So this will be replayed wherever you're watching this. So you'll be able to, once we kind of wrap up here, to rewind to the beginning. But we covered a little bit of it as well. So the answer to that is that there is a way, yes, to separate that. Short answer wise. Let's see here.
Yeah, and I'll get into much more detail on that strategy on the 18th.
John, thank you for your comment. I have a problem with the private contractors. That they send us to. They send us for 15 minutes. They carry too much weight. I'm 70 and was a firefighter. So I would say in this case here, and I'll let Sean give his take, John. When it comes to instances where those CMPs are not the way they should, or you don't feel you're getting a fair shake, I would offer to you that as a veteran, right? As someone who's served the country, you have rights. This
Hmm.
process of the CMP is a dance with the system, but you have a say in things. You have the ability to put a memorandum for record. If things are not the way they should, don't just take the decision they gave you, right? If you were not able to walk into a CMP and truly be evaluated correctly, then you cannot rate me correctly because you didn't get the facts. And those are instances where at times many of our veterans will put a memorandum for record and say, hey Raider, hey VA, this didn't work out. I brought in things the examiner did not know what I was here for. Addressed me as my wrong name, didn't even have my file. I was there for a condition for this, but they were looking at another thing that I didn't even file for. I would request respectfully another CMP. But in instances like that, there are ways to punch back, John, right? Don't just take it and just deal with whatever they do. Sean, I don't want to open a can of worms. I know this is a powder keg here. What's your take on that, to John's point?
Yeah, so I'm huge into documentation, right? I don't believe in giving too much, but I'm a big believer. If you had a bad CNP, 15 minutes doesn't mean that it was bad. If you were going for an increase, it could have actually been a good one. But if it was blatantly bad and they kept, bringing up questions or talking about their sister who was in Afghanistan with you, you need to call out an inadequate examination and request a new one. However, as with anything, I believe that you ought to document it regardless. I'm a big believer in creating a memorandum for record and saying and using that opportunity to restate your symptoms and restate the actual discussion that you had with that contractor. Because quite often that avoids paperwork mishaps. It also will flag the rater if they read your memorandum for record, they're going to say something's not right there. Right? So, he's saying he was able to speak to this symptom. I don't see it anywhere on here. The rater can call an inadequate exam as well. The MFR gives you that voice. When there's two people in a room and only one saying what happened, that's kind of a problem. If there's two people in a room, two people ought to be saying what happened. That's the way I see it. So I'm a big fan of the memorandum for record. Try to write something up a page to a page and a half long, get all your bullet points out in very few sentences and get it kicked out. There. It also sets you up in the event that you did have a bad examination, and it sets you up to be able to have an argument in the event that you need to go to higher level review.
And that really comes down to where, regardless of where you're at, right? So my tip that I would say as we close out here is it doesn't matter where you're at in this journey. The key of having strategy and having a coach and someone work with you is that where you are at, we will meet you and put together a plan of action, right? You may well have been deep into doing things the wrong way, so now the plan is how to go ahead and get you out of that situation, help better make an argument that may have been made incorrectly. So there's an individual who may have not filed the right way the first time. There's an individual who may be rated but underrated, right? He filed, but the increase, it has not been successful. There's a plan for that. There may be an individual who may have things combined incorrectly and they're not truly being assessed for the level of impairment that they are dealing with accurately. There's a plan for that. And what I mean by that is that basically that's strategy. It's looking at how can we align now lessons learned and key things to be able to direct and say, okay, this is the best course of action for Sean, which is going to be different for the one for Bill, which is going to be different for the one for James. So that's really what it comes down to. There's no cookie cutter way to do a specific thing, but no matter where you fall on the spectrum, that's why we wanted to talk about this. And, we'll share the series that we'll put together as it relates to TBI. But for those, again, that don't know, tomorrow we'll be live again with Brian Reese talking about a legendary tale of my road to my service dog and PTSD and mental health, invisible injuries, which, is kind of what, you look at it as everything looks fine, but we're dealing with different things, right? TBI here, PTSD there, et cetera, and so forth, all these things, and they morph and affect other things. So I would say I appreciate all of you for really spending the afternoon with us. Again, share this with someone that you may feel might need value to be able to see this again, right? Like to really sit down and go back and listen to what was shared because we do it with trying to pay forward and give someone else what we didn't have when we began the journey, right? Don't commit the mistakes needlessly because you can do it alone, right? You know what? At the end of the day, no one here learned how to be a sailor, a Marine, a soldier, or an airman or a Coast Guard, a Coastie by themselves. You went through training, you learned to do a thing. You didn't know how to use a rifle. You were taught to use a rifle. When it comes to this situation, you don't know what you don't know, so learn. That's what it all comes down to. VA Claims Insider has positioned itself as the one source of education-based services for a veteran to educate themselves. Military Disability Made Easy. We're in there all the time because it's information. If you know, that is power. Knowledge is power in this regard, and we're trying to ensure that we spread that, right? So share the information. Thank you guys for being here. We'll be back again with more information. Make sure that you make a point to really just ponder this and check on your friends, check on your battle buddies, check on, your shipmates, because there's someone out there that with everything that's happening right now, you may not know what's happening with them, but just check on your strong friends, the ones that never say anything, because that's sadly, some of the things that we're seeing is happening with social distancing and what's happening in the world now. So be safe, take care of each other. Sean, from me, I appreciate you guys. Sean, on your side, anything else to close out?
No, thank you very much, guys, and take care of each other. We love you all, brothers and sisters that serve together. We really appreciate every one of you.